Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest has made some of the most visually inventive, innovative, beautiful films of all time. From Back to the Future to Forrest Gump to Polar Express, Robert Zemeckis has innovated both story and image to bring to life ideas we never thought possible. In his new film, Welcome to Marwen, he teams with Steve Carell to tell the story of Mark Hogancamp, a man who, after being brutally assaulted, retreats into a world of World War II dolls and photography. Zemeckis seamlessly blends everything we've loved about his work over the last 4 decades into one film, and it's funny, dazzling, and pretty heartfelt. Let's take a look at the trailer for Welcome to Marwen. Everybody, please welcome the great Robert Zemeckis.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
It's an honor to have you on this stage. You've made some of the films that I grew up with, that I was an adult with, movies that I think people will cherish forever. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
What interested you in doing this movie? I told you backstage that one of the things that I was so kind of blown away by was that it felt like everything, it felt like all these elements from all of your movies over the years sort of combined into one, to the point where even you had to kind of reference it at one point in the middle of the movie.
Exactly. I think you're right about that. I mean, what I loved, obviously, is I couldn't believe this was a true story, and I thought that this amazing healing journey that Mark Hogancamp went on really fascinated me. But I was also really taken with his ability to use art, the healing power of art, or the healing power of his imagination to help himself through this trauma and to make sense of all this stuff that happened to him.
And that starts with the dolls and the animation. And can you talk about creating that animation? You've done stuff like this before, but there was something about this. I don't feel like I've ever seen this particularly on screen.
This is new. I mean, this is it was done with performance capture, so it wasn't really animation, but it was an advanced performance capture, something that is pretty new. I mean, very new. We just invented it for this movie, but it actually captures everything about the actor's performance, and then it's translated onto the doll or the CG doll avatar, and the actors move it completely.
The actors are moving the dolls as well?
Oh, yep, every single one, absolutely, yep.
So how much do you have? Obviously, you have nothing animated before the actors do the motion capture, right?
No, nothing. We just kind of lay out the the sets for them and what it's going to look like, and then we step into what we call the volume, which is where we, all these receptors that record what the actors do in 3D. And it's kind of like being on a very simple stage. We do the scenes like we're doing black box theater.
Can I ask, what do you enjoy more, when you're shooting in something like that and then you get to animate it, and it seems to me like you have full control over exactly how it goes, or working with actors and being on a set or being on a location where a little bit has to be left up to kind of chance?
Yeah, there's a little bit. Well, yes, right. When you're shooting, with lens cameras in a traditional movie sense, there's wonderful things that can happen. There can be a beautiful sunset that just happens to be there at the moment that you're going to roll the camera, and I can count things that happened to me in my career like on one hand where that happened. Usually it's the other way. Right. Usually what happens is
you're missing the sunset because it's going down, and you got to get something.
And they never get the camera off the truck in time, and it's that kind of a thing. But in performance capture, you get to have the wonderful, accident performance things that happen that the actors bring, and you don't have to worry about whether it was in focus or not. It's captured, it's there, and you'll have it. So if an actor does a fantastic line reading once and you can never get it back again, you've got it. And you can make that into a close-up, or you can make that into a wide shot, you can make that into whatever you need as the filmmaker. So it does give the director more control, which I do like.
Do you get a little let down when you have to get out of the performance capture box and you have to be thrown into the wild again?
No, yes. I mean, it's like when you're making a movie traditionally with lens cameras, you have to do things out of continuity. You got to worry about the light, you got to worry about the actors hitting their marks. All that stuff is sort of is I call it the tyranny of production.
Yeah.
You get used to it. That's what you do. But in performance capture, it's just about talking to the actors about performance. That's all you do. And it's like,
Wow.
it's literally like doing theater. They pace the scene, they act together, and all day long on the set, all you do is act, and they perform because you don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to do anything else, and you do everything in continuity, do the scenes from beginning to end. It's really cool.
That's fascinating because I think that often there is a misunderstanding of directors and who not necessarily prefer but do motion capture more, is that they're less focused on performance for some reason. But it sounds to me like you're actually a bit more of a theater director, and you get more time to work with performance via motion capture.
You actually do, because you don't have to break it up. That's what I love about it. You know, it's just all there, and you got that wonderful energy of what the cast is bringing and how they do the scene.
Right, and there's no like relighting, repositioning. So go back to the character and the real human being, Mark Hogancamp. One of the things that I loved about this film is that it's a family movie, but with the message of accepting someone that I don't think we've ever seen be accepted in a family movie before. Someone who is flawed and learns to work through their flaws, and their flaws also being in some ways, you know, if we're judging him at times, creepy, you could say, in his way of working through that. Can you talk about working through those tones? How do you put those things inside of a family movie?
Well, yeah. Well, I think I think you can do it, and you just have to be truthful to what's going on and how, and that was my first responsibility, is to be truthful to Mark Hogancamp, who the story's based on, and his journey. But I think the things that the movie speaks about, the themes of the movie, are very relevant today, and I think that they're things that people should talk about. And there was no reason to not make it a movie for families, if you will. I mean, it's what's going on in the world, and I really didn't, and there was never got any pushback from the studio, or did I ever think for 1 minute that it couldn't be something that we just couldn't present in the most honest way possible.
So wow, that's crazy. There was never a moment where you were like, because I wonder all the time when it comes to filmmaking and storytelling, how much you can present and what you can't present, and where to hold back and where to push forward, especially with something like a family movie and a story like this, because his is one of depth, and it's not like he's struggling to win the baseball game.
Right. Well, when it comes to doing a family movie, or in this case, it's a PG-13 movie. I'm not sure that really, really young people, I mean, like 5-year-olds would, understand this movie, but. I take a book out of Walt Disney's. I take a page out of Walt Disney's book. I mean, the real Walt Disney. And he made his family movies for adults. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's what I do. I make, I don't ever think that you should talk down to young people. I mean, they get everything anyway. So I just, obviously we have things that you can't do certain things that are not going to work in a rating, but in a PG-13 movie, I just, talk to everybody like they're an adult.
Yeah, and the character is struggling with his relationship with women, how he relates to women, how he puts them up on a pedestal, and how he doesn't actually interact with them as human beings, which is such a fascinating, I think, brave story to tell in a movie like this. Was that something that attracted you to the story?
Yeah, I mean, he's, the movie speaks, it has a major theme about female empowerment, and how, what Mark does is, women who are important in his life, they're his protectors and his guardians, and they're completely accepting of who he is, and they're not judgmental, and he honors them by creating these characters using these fashion dolls in his world, and he dresses the dolls to be similar to the women who he's in real life, who he's creating an alter ego for, if you will. And that's a very, I mean, I love that part of his story, that that was his, he calls them his backup in the movie. He never goes anywhere without his backup, and it's this group of women that he that he brings with him in their alter ego doll form.
And at one point he says they're saviors of the world.
His his alter ego says that. Captain Hoagie says that. But yes, he says that. They're women.
Saviors of his world.
Well, and he says, globally, women are the saviors of the world. Absolutely, yeah.
At the beginning of this interview, I said that this movie encapsulates a lot of elements from all of your work over the years, and one of them, in particular, is a direct reference to movies of yours.
Yeah. So if you're a Back to the Future fan,
of course,
you're
not Get Out of the Building.
If you're a Back to the Future fan, there's a major cookie in this movie, and it's as close to Back to the Future 4 as you're ever going to get while I'm alive. Let me put it that way.
Because that's never happening. I saw an interview recently where I think you said that's never happening, right?
Exactly. But
you think I said
we have a little bit of
a remake is over your dead body? A remake is over your dead body?
Oh yeah, literally. And Bob Gale's, but after we're dead, then they probably will do a remake.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
But I won't care.
Yeah.
but in this movie, yeah, there's a major kind of, not that big of a, but there's a nod to the trilogy.
And what made you do that? What made you feel comfortable doing that?
Well, I'll tell you absolutely. There's a moment that comes in the story where our hero's alter ego is ordered to build a time machine.
Yeah.
And
why not?
I figured, well, there's only one way that anyone in today's world would understand what a time machine should look like, and I just went for it.
Was there any hesitation about it, or any self-consciousness about sort of dipping into your own work or being self-referential?
Yes and no, but then I thought to myself, well, what can I do about it? Because I thought if I took like maybe a dozen strangers off the street and asked them that question, I know what answer I would get. If I said, if you were to build a time machine, what do you think it would look like? I know what they would say. They'd say it probably looks like a flying car. And so I have to, I figure that that's become this cultural thing, and I said, like I said earlier, I just went for it.
Leslie Mann delivers a really beautiful performance in the movie. It's very textured and layered, and it's a performance of a person who has real depth and humanity. What made you cast her? That sounds like I'm saying she doesn't have that, but she does. But what made you cast her?
Well, I cast her because she's a magnificent actress, but she also has the qualities, and specifically the comedic qualities, that all my cast needed, and her very specifically, to be able to transition to the doll. So it takes a certain performance or actor understanding, and I think it comes from comedy, for half the movie to say, well, you're a fashion doll, and you got to make that work. And so she was able to do both, and she's in the movie she did it perfectly, and that was my thinking when I offered her the part.
When you auditioned people, did they audition as the doll, as doing the doll, or did they audition as the other characters?
Well,
the other versions of themselves. Excuse me.
Well, the level of the cast that I have in the movie, they don't audition.
Fair.
But what you do though is you look at their body of work, right. and you start to say, say, well, they have this actress or this actor has the qualities that I need for this character, and then that's what you base your decision on.
You also have literally one of my favorite actresses working in the movie, and that's Merritt Weaver. I just think she's incredible, and I'm hoping that this and the Netflix series that she made last year will be the things that kind of propel her to, I think, the levels of stardom that she deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. She's like a unbelievable actress. I mean, she's magnificent. I mean, everything that she does is like, I mean, she gives you so many choices, and they're all good and they're all right, and it's fantastic. I mean, she can just make anything work.
What had you seen her in that made you cast her in the film?
I actually saw her in Nurse Jackie, and that's where I saw her for the first time. And when I saw her in that, I was like, whoa, she'd be perfect for this character in my movie. But I've been watching her. Maybe I was kind of like even writing that character with her in mind, if I really want to be honest about it. Yeah.
Really? Like, you think maybe you didn't know it at the time,
I
but
didn't know whether she would do it or not, but when you're writing, actually how it happens, you kind of have shadows of actors that, anyway, in my mind, I do when I'm writing. I feel like, but it's interesting. A lot of them are different actors show up saying different lines, so I don't really have one actor in my mind completely.
so you have this is interesting. You have a shadow of an actor, but they might still show up and do it differently than you had assumed or
Hopefully.
had written it.
Hopefully they're going to bring a lot more to it and they're going to enhance it. That's what I love about working with magnificent actors, is because they can do a turn on a line that you never imagined, and it's like, wow, that's great, and it's just that's the whole process that makes it so wonderful.
Can I ask you a filmmaking 101 question?
Please.
What do you do when you have an actor who doesn't know how to do that and who doesn't do that? What do you
What
recommend a
happens in
director
that,
does?
it's usually a day player. It's usually a day player who is so thrilled and excited to be doing the movie, and they're going to come in and work for one day, and they've been working on that scene for about 30 days, and you and the whole main cast you've got a shorthand going, and everybody's clicking, everybody knows, and this actor shows up and he does his first take and he's in a completely different movie. And then 90 people turn and look at me and say, okay, you're the director, pal. Now what are you going to do?
Oh.
Now what are you going to do? And so you just have to kind of take them aside or her aside and just kind of deprogram them and work them through it, because you cast them for the right reason. They just didn't have the advantage of being with this whole troupe that's been going through this process.
And they showed up with a lot of ideas, which
They
is
showed up with a lot of ideas and a complete just a completely different idea of what the character or what the tone of the movie is, or whatever that problem might be.
So one of the performances we haven't talked about yet is obviously Steve Carell. It's
Right.
an incredible performance. I think it's one of his best that he's done as a dramatic actor. Was Steve in mind when you were writing this?
Yes, he was actually, because exactly the same thinking that I had about the rest of my cast. I needed someone who had the ability to do both. And then when I saw him in Foxcatcher, it was like that performance just blew me away. And I thought, okay, this guy can do, in my opinion, anything. And he was able to do this performance way better than I ever imagined. He's such a great actor.
Foxcatcher, underrated comic performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, but a really cool one, but a very underrated. Yeah, and so that obviously, that's what I was seeing and what I wanted in this movie too.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a person who's just a few hairs off.
But I'll give you my own personal opinion as a film director.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, all the great dramatic actors always could do comedy. 100%. And you can really feel it in their dramatic work. And the ones that never were able to do comedy, they're just not as good as the ones who can.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think of even dramatic actors who aren't known for doing comedy and are still very funny in their dramatic roles. Like Joaquin Phoenix is a hilarious actor to watch, but he never does comedy.
Exactly. And the reason I think that works is because at the end of the day, we're making a movie.
Everybody's having fun.
Yeah, exactly. We're making a movie. It's not like we're we're just goofing around.
When did you discover that as a director? Not that necessarily the thing about dramatic actors, but I imagine there's such a pressure in making movies, right? And even if you're doing a drama, maybe it's your first drama, there becomes a pressure about how dramatic you are on set and what you're bringing. When did you discover that it didn't matter? You needed to be light and have fun.
Yeah, I was fortunate because I was able to, I didn't. In all the movies that I made that were comedies, I never cast anyone who was a comedy actor. I always cast actors who were pretty good at doing drama, even though they did a lot of comedy. But as I was watching movies, kind of coming up in the craft, and my favorite actors, I would find, even if I never was working with them, when I see them doing something magnificent, then I'd see them on like a talk show or something, and they're really funny. And I'm going, yeah, okay, I'm starting to make the connection.
Someone who knows how to have fun with
Someone who knows how to have fun, exactly.
Yeah. Let's get some questions from our audience. Who's a question?
Hi, Mr. Zemeckis. My name is Eric Cameron. Huge fan. Back to the Future has always been one of my favorite films of all time and inspires me every day. So throughout your career, you've been one of the greatest pioneers in the industry. And I noticed that with each one of your films, you utilize new filmmaking techniques. So my question for you today is, what is the most important technique you've used during your career that you would like to pass down to the next generation of filmmakers? And what types of movies would you like to see utilize these techniques?
What was the last part?
Which kind of movies would you like to see utilize the techniques that you've picked up over the years?
Okay, well, my favorite. Well, this is going to sound a little bit pretentious, but my favorite visual effect that I use in all my movies is a close-up. Because that's something that you can't see in real life. But I know where you're getting with the question. So, I've been a pioneer in the digital cinema and in performance capture. And I think that that's a major tool that's going to be used in the future. And I think it's kind of really wonderful that, filmmakers, we're getting close. They can create almost any image perfectly that looks photoreal. And so I think that it's going to be really exciting what filmmakers in the future are going to be able to do, because they'll be able to just create any image. And I think what's going to be the most exciting about that is that the technique of cinema will vanish, and it'll all come back down to story and character, because no one will pay any attention to what we now call visual effects, because anybody will be able to do them.
So it'll be solely about whether or not you can tell a good story.
Exactly. It's going to go completely. It's completely back to that. The greatest, most interesting examples I heard about it is like when art moved from painting in fresco to acrylic paint. Wow. And sort of like for maybe for about 80 years we've been making movies like we're painting in fresco, and now with the digital cinema we're going to have acrylic paint, and so that's going to just open the art form up to everybody.
Was there anything that was ever lost for you when you moved from film to digital? Were you ever one of the Nolan types who were kind of like sort of a champion of 35 millimeter film? Did you feel like you lost anything?
No, it was as a matter of fact, one thing nobody ever talks about is, thank God we don't have to use all those chemicals anymore and pour them into the environment to process all that film. It was pretty toxic stuff. But I don't miss. It was great when that's all we had was this 100-year-old mechanical mechanical process of moving pictures. But I love the digital cinema.
Yeah, you don't miss the check the gate. Oh, we didn't get it. Okay, let's do
I don't miss that at all. Or your whole day's work was burned up in the lab.
Did that happen to you?
No, it didn't happen to me. But I did have a whole roll of negative get completely lost in the lab, where we couldn't find an entire roll of film. It just got lost. Wow. It was negative. So I had to go in and use alternate takes to finish the movie.
Wow. The worst story I ever heard about that was the film that Soderbergh produced, and I can't remember the director's name. Lodge Kerrigan, I think. It was a Western, and the entire print of the movie burned in a fire before they could start editing it.
Oh yeah, I know.
That's the whole.
But the thing that I love though is being able to go into the theater now and see a rock steady image. Yeah. We don't have to have that projector movement and all that. I love the digital cinema.
Yeah. Let's get another question right here. Hi.
Hi, I really admire your work, and as an aspiring filmmaker, I was wondering what was the first project you ever worked on, and what did it teach you, whether it's about pre-production or production or post-production?
Well, you're talking about my first movie I ever did? Mm-hmm. The first movie I ever did was I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Soon to be released on Criterion in March, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. They're doing a whole big Blu-ray thing. It's gonna be great. And my favorite part of the process is post-production, is editing. I just love that. I think it's the writer in me that is I always feel like, well, I think that the main decisions, the binary decisions that you make in a movie are in pre-production. Selecting the script, casting the movie, deciding what the crew is going to be. those are what the final those are the most crucial decisions, and then the rest is, well, then production for me is just survival. You know, just get through the day, just get something that I can cut together. You know, it's like it's that kind of feel. I just got to get the movie shot. But then my favorite part is post-production, because this whole army of actors and technicians funnels down to just me, my editor, and my well, I'll call it film, but my raw material. And I just love that, because then I get to rewrite the movie, but with limitations, but with the images that I shot, and it's comfortable, and I can do it in my sandals, and I don't have to be in the freezing cold in the middle of the night, and I just love that part of the process.
Have you, even at this level of filmmaking, where for all intents and purposes, I assume you get what you want when you get to go into production, or at least you know how to pre-produce well enough so when you're in production, you're not, losing material or not shooting everything you need. Do you still find, though, in post-production moments of frustration where you're like, oh, I wish I had shot this a different way or gotten more?
Oh yeah, no. I'm hard on. I think most filmmakers are really hard on yourself. You walk away from the day's work and you just think, man, do I have enough to even make this scene work? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's kind of, it doesn't go together as you had hoped. And and then you have to, you have to struggle to make it work, and you have to really some scenes you have to really suffer over to make them work.
Do you still cry at assembly cuts?
Oh yeah, yeah, cry to the point where you might want to even be suicidal. Yes, absolutely. But I don't do, for some reason, I don't do long, giant assemblies. I cut really, really, really tight. But yeah, when I look at the movie for the first time, it's like, what was I thinking? Nothing works. This whole thing is a disaster. It's like that. That's it's such an interesting process, and it's. The one thing that you can't do as a filmmaker is ever see your movie with any objectivity. Yeah. So
that's what your editor is there for, essentially, right?
Well, then but then he's only right, and so you have to rely on him for when he says, when I saw these dailies, I always thought that was the best take. Yeah. And he's got to remember that, and you have to rely on him for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. One more, or a couple more, I think. Hey.
How you doing? I was wondering, what about Back to the Future got you interested in the project to begin with?
Wait, say that again?
What about Back to the Future got you interested in the project?
In the project of Back to the Future?
Yeah, to start it initially.
Well, I was interested in the project because I wrote it with my partner Bob Gale, and we had this. I guess we were graced with this moment of inspiration, and came up with the story about, basically it was one sentence, like, what would it be like if you were in high school and you went back in time and saw your parents in high school? And that was the germ of the idea, and we thought, hey, that could be cool. And we started we started developing it. So, I hope I always get to direct the movies that I write. But that's what interests me in that idea. Mm-hmm.
When you were writing Back to the Future, and this will go to sort of all of your films and writing them, how often did you have to look back on that germ of the idea as a form of inspiration or as a way to sort of stick to what the movie's about? Because even just thinking about it now, that is what Back to the Future is about. It's about a lot of other things, but that is still the core of the movie.
Exactly, and that's a really great question, and that is the writer's dilemma, and that is the filmmaker's dilemma. It's like, because there's so many things that start to go out of control in this process that when I was making Back to the Future and I was directing it and my writing partner Bob Gale was producing it, there were so many times where we actually said that to each other and said, look, let's remember what this movie is about, right? We really said, what was the thing that we thought was always going to work, and get back to that, because movies are, they're dynamic. They go off on all different tangents, and you got to keep reining it in. Even if you start to really have doubts about your initial instinct, you have to say, look, the reason we're making this movie is we love this idea, and we got to stick with that. And you just got to go with that initial instinct.
What was the idea for Welcome to Marwen? Did you have
Well,
that on set?
I saw the documentary, and his life story was, but there was the two ideas for Welcome to Marwen. One was I loved this incredible true story about this man who was able to take tragedy and turn it into triumph. Not to sound like a trailer, but that's exactly what happened. But I also love this idea of the healing power of art and creative imagination, because I think it's a universal idea. I think we all need that creative outlet to make sense of complicated things that we're feeling or things that are happening in our lives. And I think I identified with that, and that's what I loved about the story more than anything.
Yeah, without giving anything away, what I loved so much about the film is that his moment of triumph is one of inclusivity for all as well. It's not just him, like I said, winning the game or something. It's really about acceptance of all people.
Exactly.
One more question.
Hey, Robert. So great to meet you. You're definitely one of my favorite directors, especially at this time of year with The Polar Express, which for me is just 100 minutes of pure nostalgia. And one of the central motifs of that film, I think, is wonder. And with a lot of your other projects like Back to the Future and it's escaping me, but wonder.
Forrest Gump?
Yeah, Forrest Gump, definitely. That seems to be a central thing for you is wonder. I was wondering if that was conscious for you, and how do you inject wonder into a project?
Yeah, I think it's more subconscious than anything that I try to I don't try to impose that on the film, but I just try to I guess what I do is I just sort of take whatever is what I feel is the underlying heart of the story, and then try to use images to try to make that as interesting as I possibly can. And I think that's what movies do. I mean, my favorite quote is from Francois Truffaut, who said, "A really good movie is the perfect blend of truth and spectacle." And I liked so what I look for in movies are, I like the story that is rooted in human truth. And then I think my responsibility as a filmmaker is to present that in the most interesting, entertaining, and spectacular way, so that we go to movies to see spectacle. And a lot of times the spectacle is just a great performance, but it is a mass entertainment that we love to see, and that's sort of how I approach all the movies that I make.
Do you hunt for those little moments of wonder for the movies as well? Are you consciously aware of that? Because even just saying Forrest Gump, I think of the feather, right? And the floating feather, and the way that the score, the theme really kind of plays throughout that. Is that something, I don't remember correctly, was that in the book, or was that something that you guys sort of found to tie this together and also create a real sense of wonder for the movie?
Yeah, no, I think it came from, there was a line later in the movie when Forrest is talking to Jenny's grave, and he talks about how, I don't know if we're all just floating around on a breeze, or if we all have a destiny, and that floating around on the breeze line made me think that, oh yeah, kind of like a feather just kind of floating around on a breeze. And so that's why I thought I should bookend the movie with an image like that, because it was a beautiful little moment in the script that Eric Roth wrote. Yeah.
Before I let you go, I'm curious, a filmmaker like you who's made so many movies over the years, do you remember what your toughest movie to make was?
Physically?
Yeah, or just or mentally, whichever one you remember is
well, they're all mentally tough. They're all mentally tough to make, but the two most physically tough movies that I made were Romancing the Stone and Castaway, and they were tough. And I actually, when I finished. When I finished doing Romancing the Stone, I said to my agent, I said, if a script ever comes across your desk that has a slug line that says exterior, jungle, night, rain, don't ever give it to me. And he actually I had an artist paint that slug line and present it to me as a painting, So those were, jungle work is tough. Water is tough.
Do you remember what the hardest film was to put together? Like you were in post-production and you're just kind of struggling to figure out exactly how to put the whole thing together?
Roger Rabbit, probably.
Oh, yeah, that makes
that
sense.
was a complicated. That might be the most back in the day where we never had a single computer. That was a complicated logistics movie to put together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
painstaking, I would imagine.
Yep. Every frame had to be hand drawn. Yep.
And now with Welcome to Tomorrow, unfortunately, you have motion capture.
Right, and
performance
from
capture.
a technical standpoint, though, I think that well, you mentioned it for the whole movie, which I think I never even thought of, but definitely from a I did think when I was making this movie from a technical standpoint that I was that all the movies I had made, it kind of prepared me to make this movie. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And in some ways, it feels, I don't know if I would say like a commentary on your other movies, but it definitely feels like the culmination of a body of work.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that echoes in the past work a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you were to program a Robert Zemeckis festival and this came at the tail end of it, everybody who'd been there for the whole festival go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So it'll be interesting what the next one looks like.
Just a complete departure.
Yeah,
Just entirely
exactly.
handheld drama shot
right.
inside of a hotel room. or
One
something.
room, right? Exactly.
Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome to Marwen is opening this Friday, I believe, right? This Friday.
This Friday.
Go see it. Don't go see any other movies. Go see Welcome to Marwen.
Thank
and give
you.
Robert Zemeckis a big
Thank
round
you.
of applause.
Thank you all. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.